Good morning and welcome to this week's Social Housing Roundtable in partnership with Sandwell College. Now, one of the most important things that I try and do on these roundtables is create change. And the first thing we're really trying to change is getting young people into social housing. Now, obviously, we've had a continuation of a number of different topics over the course of the year. And if we can strike change through any of those, that's amazing. But this one is really important. How do we get young people engaged with social housing, looking at it as a career and looking at what we can do better collectively to make that change? I'm hoping today we can get some answers. I'm joined by the brilliant Sarah Onion from Sandwell College, as well as a number of guest speakers, and I'm looking forward to seeing what today brings. Many thanks.
This meeting is being recorded.
There we are, and good morning, everyone. As I say, thank you for joining us today on this Engaging Young People in Social Housing roundtable. For those who don't know me, I recognise most faces, but some are brand new. My name is Matthew Baird. I've been in the social housing recruitment world for just over a decade, but set up on my own in February last year. And started running these roundtables at the beginning of the pandemic, which probably feels a lot longer than 2 and a bit years ago. It certainly does to me. With the idea of bringing people together to try and make real change in the social housing sector. So many brilliant minds in housing, when they come together, can make change, and there aren't always the platforms to be able to do so. So these started and have grown into obviously what we've got today, and hopefully we'll continue to do so. I'm going to pass over to Sarah Onions, who's partnered with me today, to do a bit of an introduction on herself and how we came up with the idea for today. So Sarah, over to you.
Hi, thanks very much everybody for coming along. It's really nice to see so many people. Matt and I began talking about this a couple of months ago. We basically had a chat about our worlds colliding, and I'm relatively new into the education world. My background is all private sector recruitment before this, and when I got into Sandwell, I kind of looked around at our apprenticeship provision, who we were looking at placements with, and I said, where are your housing associations? You know, they seem like a really big factor, and to date we've got one apprentice with a housing association, which is nuts. A lot of our provision is trade, is customer service, is business administration, is health and social care. So to my mind, we lent ourselves really nicely for partnerships with social housing organisations, and it kind of it was shocking to me that we didn't have that relationship, and I started trying to look around at how we can bridge those gaps, and then it turned into a wider conversation with Matt about getting young people into social housing. I think that it's part of a generic not problem, but certainly a factor within social housing that a lot of people kind of fall into it. We talked about that a fair amount, actually. There aren't many people who've gone, I really want to work in social housing, but without a background of it. And even our fantastic apprentice, Callum, who we released a video of yesterday, he started his career in social housing because his dad worked there. So it struck me that actually there's an awareness problem. People aren't aware of the sector wholesale, but particularly young people. And what could we do to help with that? And also, could we use that to help with the current recruitment problems that you guys are facing? There's a workforce shortage. We've got a potential workforce ready. Can we marry those two things? So that's kind of how this started. So I'm the assistant manager director for our skills division. I'm looking basically at partnering with organisations. My job is purely to go into third-party organisations and say, what are your training needs? What are your recruitment needs? What are your upskilling needs? How can we help with that? And if we can, great. So yeah, that's my background, and that's kind of our mission now. I've asked my colleague Jess to sit in on this. Jess has been with the college a lot longer and is far more experienced and talented with what we're going to discuss. But she also manages a lot of our school and onboarding team, and she'd probably like to talk a lot more about that as we go as well. So Jess, if you'd like to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for those kind words. What a lovely introduction. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jess Lewis. I'm the Assistant Director of External Relations at the college. A large part of my role is engaging with young people within schools. I head up our schools liaison team, And again, I'm really passionate about informing, engaging, inspiring young people to consider new careers. And housing, you know, what an array of different routes there are for young people to consider. So in addition to Sarah's plans and looking at partnering, I could also assist with partnering to try and introduce you to schools or any networks that you want to speak with. We do employer networks where, you know, different employers I work with go in and speak to schools. A day in the life of, that's always really well received, a day in the life of whatever role it might be you want to highlight. And I really think it is important to start younger, not wait until they're 16 and considering an apprenticeship. Go in year 9, year 10 and start promoting those different things available to them. So delighted to be here, and anything that, you know, you think I can help you with, then please give me a shout.
Certainly will, and thank you both for coming on and partnering with this. As I say, it's something that I was quite passionate about, and it's great to have had the college immediately jump on board and say, what can we do? And we've obviously done this with quite a quick turnaround. What I want to do, I guess, is open up the conversation. There's a number of people in the room who work in housing in a number of different vices. I know people who've, looking through, but people who've been on board. I can see HR, I can see housing, I can see development. And I think other than maybe one or two people, most will turn around all the time and say exactly what Sarah mentioned there, which is they fall into housing. It is the term you hear over and over and over again whenever you talk about careers. So I guess first and foremost, was there anybody in the room today who actually sought out housing as a career? And if so, kind of what attracted you to it in the first place?
Great question.
I didn't seek out housing, but I did go into it early.
Okay, what was your route there?
So straight from school, sixth form, and I became an apprentice when I was 18 in a housing association, but it was by coincidence. No one, you know, I didn't find housing because I thought it would be a good match for me. The housing association that I worked for had an early apprenticeship program, so this is in the 90s, and they held an open day, and I went along, and I didn't feel like I knew where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted a job that wasn't just for the purpose of earning money. I wanted there to be more value to it than that. And I went along to this open day and heard what they did and thought, this is it. This could be where I belong. And that's where I stayed for a couple of years while I did my apprenticeship and trained. And then went to work in a different housing association and have been there for 15, 20 years.
Oh, sorry.
No, go on, Sarah, please.
Claire, what apprenticeship did you study? What were you studying?
It was called a modern apprenticeship.
Yeah.
So this is 1998. It's called a modern
And was
apprenticeship.
it in housing in general, or was it one specific area?
NVQ in housing.
Yeah. Oh, right. So it was a housing specific.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing, that
That's really interesting.
as far as I was aware, still exists, but yet the only people who seem to be running it now are the CIH. And it seems
it's very maintenance driven at the minute, yeah, and it probably does need a bit of a tweak, and there's actually nothing to stop us doing that. The great thing about the new standards is that actually you can splice what you need into an apprenticeship. We're doing something similar with Network Rail, for example, at the minute, who are very customer service orientated for their onboarding staff, but the onboarding apprenticeship is basically very new, and it's not really rolled out properly. So as an interim, we've got the customer service one, which is very generic, and we're able to splice quite specific things into it that make it very transport, very Network Rail orientated. So there are ways of doing that, and you could do that within housing associations, and it might be perhaps something that would be worth looking at as a group and saying, look, what collectively do we want? Because as the more generic you can make your apprenticeship, the more popular it's likely to be, because people don't feel like they're getting boxed into one thing. And that can be something that scares a lot of young people off. You know, what if I don't like it? What are my other options afterwards? So yeah, there are loads of different options. We can talk about that much later, and obviously at a later date as well. So
if anybody wants
that's
to
really
jump
interesting.
in, yeah, no, it is absolutely. I mean, if anybody, I'll bring you in 2 seconds. I was going to say, if anybody needs to or wants to jump in, feel free to use the reactions kind of hand raising thing, or just raise your hand as. Sorry, I don't know your first name, I'll get it on the screen. Or feel free to just use the chat if you don't actually want to speak or want to contribute in that way. Feel free to use the chat. I'm monitoring all of it. But yes, please come in.
So I'm Linda Gittins, and I work in a housing association, and I fell into it when it was a council. So I've been in it 35 years now. So won't leave it. But just picking up on the CIH is stopping delivering the housing apprenticeship as of September. We've also lost the YMCA delivering it last year. And I think part of the reasons for that is that to deliver it, you have to be Ofsted and you have to be on the register of training providers. And it's quite hard to meet that if you're not a standalone college or an environment that is used to delivering and being Ofsted. So I know that there's issues there, and it is something that I'm dead passionate about, that housing should not lose its own apprenticeship. So,
how did you, have you got apprentices where you are at the moment then?
Yes, we've got 59 apprentices where we are at the moment, and whilst the majority of them do fit in the trades, so carpentry, plumbing, gas, electrical, roofing, property maintenance, all of those kind of things, we have quite a few that join us straight from school as business admin.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And they'll do business admin within a certain team, hopefully get bitten by the bug of housing, and then they go on to specialise in the area that they want to go into, whether that be, we've got learning and development, we've got finance, payroll, housing itself, and we take them right through from level 2 up to level 7 if that's where they've got the ability to get to and the drive to get to. So we've also got a heck of a target, because the company have given us, we've got an apprenticeship strategy, and that target in that strategy has been put at 10% of our workforce doing apprenticeships.
Yeah.
Wow.
No,
See, that's amazing to hear, but it's also really positive, because I know one of my biggest frustrations, I think one of the reasons why this really kind of started when Sarah and I started talking about it, was that when I was going through, I went to university, I read history and education. I was going to teach, decided I didn't want to teach, and I didn't want to be a care worker. Didn't know another route into something which, as you say, cared and supported with people, but also wasn't teaching or social care. So I didn't know another route, and I wish I'd known at the time about housing, as that's exactly where I would have gone. And everyone I spoke to in the sector, it's one of those where there's every chance someday I'll end up joining you guys on the other side, because it's the sector I'm most passionate about, and I speak about it every day. But I do agree with you completely there, that if we're losing the chance for apprentices to come through, you're losing not just that next workforce, but more importantly, you're losing people knowing about it as a career option.
Yeah, yeah. We've done a lot of work over the last, it's slowed down over the pandemic, don't get me wrong, but we've done a lot of work with the CIH and with the West Midlands Apprenticeship Ambassadors Network, of which quite a lot of us are housing related, to make sure that people don't just fall into housing. They do stand up and they say, please miss, can I find out a bit more about housing as a career? Because people just see it as, well, they don't see the vast opportunities that there are in housing. We've got hundreds of different job roles.
There's quite a lot of opportunity to go for there's no reason why you couldn't approach a college, and it's something that we would look at for a housing apprenticeship. As long as the numbers are there, the cohorts are available, then the college will fund it. We're quite receptive to market trends, and if people are pulling out of that market for one reason or another, then like as a college, we'll look at it and go, look, can we step in? Is it cost effective? Basically, can we cover our own costs for delivery? And if we can, then we'll do it. That's the only.
But again, that comes down to making sure that people are aware of that as an option. I think this whole thing is about raising that awareness. I'm going to bring Claire back in, because she's raised her hand. I do just want to read Lozzie, who's put in the chat that she feels that a large issue is the amount of bias and misconceptions that many adults have about housing associations and supported housing. Their views are bound to filter down to their children and change their view of the sector as a career path. And I couldn't have put that better myself, Lozzie. Claire, I'm going to bring you in, and then we'll come back to Lozzie's point, or feel free to obviously comment on it yourself.
I don't know whether my particular experience is related to the structure of the CIH apprenticeship, or whether it was particular to the employer that I worked for. But one of the benefits that I gained from was that my apprenticeship was I worked there for a couple of years, but I did placements in each different team. So I was moved around the business. So I spent some time in customer services. I spent some time in rent arrears. I spent some time in the technical services team and with development and with finance. So I was moved around as a bit of a moving workforce. So I was
Now, the
passed
benefit
around.
of seeing the apprenticeship, it'd be difficult to comment, but my assumption would be that it probably is something to do with the course as well as the employer. I think it takes willingness from the employer to make it happen, but there are course requirements within certain apprenticeships that would guarantee that movement a little bit. But I suspect that actually your employer just did it very well, because there are ways of just saying, oh yeah, go and do a week here, and then you go back to the area that maybe you're needed the most as a bum on a seat, which can happen. But actually, I think if you're a good employer and you actually want to get the best out of someone and find their area of expertise or the area that they're passionate about, that they're going to add the most value to long term, then actually, getting them to go and experience different departments and still fulfilling that apprenticeship requirement is a very, very good way of doing it, I think.
I imagine that also for you made you want to get into housing even more because you've been given the chance there.
Yeah. I managed to experience this particular specialisms one by one and choose which one really appealed to me, I guess.
Lucy, let me bring you in, but thank you, Claire. Thank you very much.
Hi, morning everybody. Yeah, I mean, just in terms of falling into housing, I was at classic falling into, did a politics degree. There was a social housing module on the degree, which I found so dull, I didn't even bother revising for the final exams. It was like, no way do I fancy that. And it was somebody, a friend of a friend who'd actually done an accountancy degree, started working for a housing association and said, this is a sector, you'll love it. And, as serendipity happens, opened the paper that night, because this was the time when, you only had newspapers for jobs, and saw 2 housing trainee jobs. And I applied for one, got it, and was, and fell in love with it straight away. Really lucky, got to do a postgraduate on a day release as a trainee, and it was just fantastic. But I think, a problem the sector's got now particularly is a lot of the so a slightly older age group, for people finding our roles, we have different titles for jobs, from housing officer to neighbourhood coordinator to neighbourhood coach to and I think
officer, income officer, rent officer, ASB officer.
Exactly. Yeah, and I do quite a bit of mentoring, and I do mentoring for the 1 Hour Project, and there's not a housing link that's made. So I'm always mentoring people who are doing generally a social work background, and I talk to them about housing and the opportunities and the real similarities, and a lot of our support-based roles that we have in housing association, victim support officers, positive engagement officers, whatever we might call them, which is a variety of different names, but they are very much like a social work role. And every time I talk to these people afterwards, they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize housing was an option. It sounds fantastic. Yeah. And subsequently they go on and look, and a number of them have made that choice to move in social housing. But I do think the fact that we don't have titles for jobs that are necessarily, we know what they mean, but they're not descriptive for somebody else, and they're not aligned to the types of courses and things that people are doing, unless you are doing a specific housing course at that level. So I think there's a real issue there, so even when we've attracted people to the sector, they don't even know what it is that we've got, because we call everything such different names.
Your industry is not alone in that respect, I don't think. That happens pretty much across the board, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it's such a difficult problem to solve in terms of job title changes, because then as an industry, I'm guessing, and I don't know, but I'm guessing you're fairly unionised, especially ex-council employees. I would be my assumption.
Less so than you'd imagine. You'd probably think so.
Oh, wow,
it's a strange one. There are membership groups almost, but that's pretty close to we get the CIH or the NHF.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Well, I suppose with or without that factor, changing job titles, and anyone from an HR background here will probably be going, no, please don't make us change everybody's contract. That would be an issue. But maybe something that you could solve is a set of key skills that you agree on for each type of job, and when you advertise your jobs, having those there to search on, so there's some uniformity.
I think part
there.
Of the issue, Sarah, is that we have, even if we look at entry level, we have housing assistant, you have customer service advisor, you have customer service assistant, you have estates assistant, and they're all entry roles. And I completely agree with Lucy there. I think also, though, what's interesting is that we've got all of these roles, and yet, as you say, unless you're involved in the sector, you don't even know these roles exist. And it's that it's why I'm delighted to have the college on board and to have everyone who's come here today, because we need to get young people aware of these roles. They know about police and teaching and the rest of it. They don't know the job titles. They don't know the first job title they might have if they go into the police, but they know it is a career. So how do we get housing in the same way? Arthur, I'm going to bring you in a moment, and then I'm going to bring in Linda. But just a couple of comments in the chat. I didn't know your first name, so I've got H. Airdrie. Apologies for not knowing your first name there. But having worked as a careers advisor, I think that young people find it difficult to understand all the possible roles available and the skills they would be using. Work experience, opportunities, and involvement in school careers work is a great way to try and clarify the fuzzy understanding. By the way, Linda has always been great at supporting this, so advocacy for Linda, which is brilliant. And I agree, work experience is definitely a massive one, and I'm really glad that I'm bringing Arthur in the chat at the moment, but on Thursday, we're doing a work experience day with a number of young people at Bourneville Village Trust, which I'm sure he'll mention in a minute, and thanks to the college in Bourneville for partnering on that. And then Lozzie Fisher, just to follow up, a big issue that we have in society is that young people aren't taught about life in the real world whilst at school. How to maintain a home, how to pay bills, how to save money, and so on. Housing associations have a perfect opportunity to improve the narrative and engage the new generation by interacting with schools to help teach the next generation. We also need to be pushing for this kind of learning at a national and political level. And Helen mentioned they aren't linked to a union, they have internal staff councils. So again, something to look at. Arthur, I'm going to bring you in, then Linda and Marie. So Arthur, over to you.
Thank you. Sorry I was late. I was having some IT issues. I think I couldn't catch your name. We was just talking a minute ago around falling into housing. So same, I fell into housing. What I really struggle with, which I think we still struggle with as a sector, is that we put this emphasis on experience as being like a precursor to, you can be a housing officer if you've been a housing officer, but the reality is we all know you can't be a housing officer until you are a housing officer. So what we've done at BVT is we've moved away from a really specific set of job evaluation methods, which are, well, how many years have you worked in lettings? What kind of income management collection have you done? And actually moved to a skills-based approach, which says you don't necessarily have to have any experience, but our customer services team, majority of those people in there are from a retail background or a service industry background who have said, actually, I'm used to delivering customer services, and I think I could do it here. I think what we do and what we've done for a long time is we've tried to professionalize housing in such a way that it's really exclusionary. So, making it out. So I'll give you an example. I applied 16 times to different jobs at Birmingham City Council when I graduated from university. And every single time I got knocked back to say, you've got no housing experience, which is fine, because obviously, it doesn't hurt to have that. But at the same time, I persevered. There's lots of young people, I imagine, that would try once and go, oh, forget it, I won't bother then. And we miss a huge amount of talent and expertise by doing that. So as I said, moving away from, you've never done lettings before in your past. Okay, what makes you want to do this job? If they've got the right skills, the attributes, and the desire to do it, then we need to start giving younger people that chance. The other thing I just wanted to say as well is I think it's often the wrong faces that advertise housing. So we always talk around, advertising, promoting it. If you can't see it for yourself in the pictures of the promotion. So, when we take photos of our housing officers, we do tend to pick, I'll pick Jean because Jean's been here a long time and Jean's really, really popular. She's a great housing officer. That's fine. But if you're 18 and, and I'm not trying to be ageist or gender specific here, but somebody that looks completely different to you think, oh, actually, doesn't look particularly exciting. It's not a sexy job, is it? I want to go work for PwC instead. So we need to be smarter at actually promoting the diversity that's already existing within housing, and especially those young apprentices as well that are coming through.
Yeah,
couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of people, the amount of nods I saw there, and I think as well, that's where you get your diversity group. Because again, I didn't realise how many young people in housing until I started really interacting with the sector. Because obviously when you recruit, you tend to speak to managers, directors, and then you discover this huge cohort of young people. That's, again, it's that social network. That is so important. I'm going to bring in Linda, then Marie, then Anna. So Linda, over to you.
So first of all, I think housing confuses itself by what sector it sits in, because you're not necessarily in the public, you're not in the private, you're in this bit in the middle. So we fall down the gap there. Totally agree with what Arthur said about skills, because you shouldn't be looking for 10 years experience as a housing officer. You want problem solving skills. You want to be able to communicate with people. You want those kinds of skills. And we've started to recognise what transferable skills people have from the roles that they're in, that are in totally different job roles to what they want to work with us in, if that makes sense. Because we've got quite a few people that have come from, say, the police background or social work background that have joined us. Now, they've got no housing experience as stuff, as specific, but the skills that they bring around working in the community and with problem solving and liaising with people is paramount. We also find that we have a lot of people that join us, and then, like you were saying about the entry level jobs, quite a few of our people join us in our hub, our call centre, and then go from there. So we see that as quite often the entry role, and then that gives them the opportunity to see what part of housing it is that inspires them to move around into different parts.
I don't know of many sectors where someone will join into housing and continually stay in it as often as social housing does. You seem to get your teeth into. Nearly everybody stays for a career, but their career is so vast and so broad across multiple sectors. And I think I agree with you completely there, Linda.
My daughter was a prime example. She left school, I don't know, 2008, wanted to go in the police force. I said, well, you're not hanging around for 2 years. You've got to find something until you can join the police force. Didn't want to stay at school, came to us, did a customer service apprenticeship. She's still with us. She's working in lettings. She's done lettings, she's done homelessness, she's done various different things. She never wanted to go in the police force after she realised, A, what the police do, because we work with the police. And then she thought, I don't want the nasty bit of the police, but I like the nice bit, so I'll stay with housing. So it's getting it out there, what opportunities there are.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. I'm going to read a couple of comments of the thing, then I'm going to bring in Marie. But Michael, great to have you with us, Michael. I know you've been on a number of these roundtables with us, so lovely to see you today. He has mentioned a completely fair point, which is that there are all manners of politics in play, association dependent. In his arena of compliance, repairs and voids, some contract most on-site activity out. So there might be a DLO, so your direct labour organisation, some are an ALMO, some are a mix, obviously some are contractors. Agree with you, it's finding the best route for an apprentice or to get young people in. And Lozzie, as a neurodivergent person, a non-binary person who's had a very patchy career so far, it's extremely frustrating how much focus there is on needing housing experience and the ongoing lack of diversity in many areas of the sector. She fell into housing about 3 years ago, but only because they were temping. And it gives them an opportunity to prove themselves and be offered permanent work. They know this is the sector they want to continue in, but even being on the inside, it feels very difficult to progress when you're a diverse employee. And Arthur's mentioned that he's starting in customer services too, and he's obviously director now. Lots of really interesting points. I want to come back to Lottie's in a moment. I'm going to bring in Marie because they've been patient. So Marie, let me bring you in.
Hi. So I just wanted to make a couple of points. First of all, I fell into housing, but I fell in through customer service route. Learned absolutely loads in all of the different areas, which has helped and benefited me because I then went and set up my own business, which serves the housing sector, which was a real positive. But I wanted to give a mention. I'm an enterprise advisor as part of the Careers and Enterprise Company. And this gives us an opportunity to go into schools and work with careers leads. Now, this is something that's a nationwide initiative, and it's an excellent opportunity, if you like, for people that are working in housing to get more involved. So I know that Linda is part of it. Helen, who is Helen Ardrey, is my coordinator actually at Worcester. But this is, it's an opportunity for housing professionals to get in early and promote the sector more, which is a fantastic initiative. So, yeah, being an enterprise advisor, you can do it alongside your role as well.
Oh, brilliant. Sorry, I nearly accidentally ended the meeting now. I pressed the wrong shortcut. That was a nightmare. I nearly kicked everybody out.
Hi.
No, Marie, thank you. And I've obviously worked with you on your enterprise and been on your podcast and things and know the value that's bringing in. So thank you very much for sharing.
I think it's probably well worth yourself and Jess having a conversation at some point, Marie. That sounds like it'd be really beneficial, actually.
It is. I mean, I definitely support the enterprise coordinator roles. I think it's fantastic for every sector, and they're literally, open arms to welcome people in to go out and inspire young people and tell them about their sector. So definitely, I'd say Marie.
The
You know,
help to
that's
Marie
a
is firmly
fantastic
based
role.
as well, because she was, I know we've met a few times in Longridge, so I'm sure there'll be some nice bit of synergy there. So that's, there we are, roundtables creating change, the whole point in the enterprise. Anna, let me bring you in. Thank you for being patient.
Hi guys, so I'm from housing, fell in 3 years ago from retail. Just like Marie, I'm part of a enterprise advisor. You have connections with so many schools, it's unreal. The demand where they want to do work experience. Totally agree with what Arthur says. I think coming from retail into housing, very big culture shock for me, but we don't do enough to get housing out there. So part of my role as a talent acquisition manager is to put housing on the map. It's to literally our career site, it's diabolical. So we're literally, it's one of my objectives and projects that we're going to work on. So it's about, we do some great, I heard the rumors, the stigmas, why are you going into housing, and actually I kind of thought to myself, why am I going into housing? And actually it's not only when you start to go into housing you see some of the great opportunities, the great work, and we're not getting out there. Our social media is not great, so it's about we really need to start working on it. We really need to get out there. And what we've started to do, we revamped our work experience. So we want to bring youngsters from day one, so they don't have the life skills. Yes, so we're working on a part of our apprenticeship program. It's not only do we give them an opportunity to do the apprenticeship, but our L&D team are, how are we going to teach them those life skills? So, okay, we're going to be a project manager. He's going to learn, or she's going to learn how to be that project manager, but they've never had a manager that they don't know how to manage. So how are we going to do that? What does that look like? So we're starting to look at that, but we're starting to bring them in as young as work experience. And what we want to do is the shiny stars, the ones that are really passionate, that really want to stay with us at the end, we will keep in contact with them. And when we do have those apprenticeships, instead of advertise them, we want to give them to those work experience candidates, because we feel, you know, if they've come in and they've applied well and they're picking up the life skills and they're picking up the role, actually, why wouldn't we want to give it to them? So that's something small that we're starting to do. We know we can't pay, we're a small housing association, we can't pay the big bucks that these big housing associations are paying. So our development director, his strategy is, I'm not going to pay a development manager £75,000 because everyone else is. I'm going to bring apprenticeships in, and his 5-year plan is, and I think we've got 7 apprenticeships in development, some really good candidates on level 7, you know, really studying, really applying themselves, and there's some fantastic candidates. So and that's our 5-year plan, you know, bring in, whether they're young or mature. You know, we're starting to look at our salaries, because we feel we have mature candidates, and we're finding a lot of the police force, we're finding that really want to go through our trade opportunities. So it's just, how can we make sure that we're offering a competitive salary to engage them, to get them to start over? So that's just something that we're kind of doing. It's a lot of work, but something that we're kind of doing to kind of help to get people and talent on board. Yes, it is a 5-year plan. The here and now, it's a lot of headhunting, and again, like Arthur, we are bringing people with like finance. We can't find loads of qualified candidates, but what we're saying is, if they've got the right attitude, they've got some experience, some of the transferable skills, we will pay for that. We're very good at housing. We love to pay, you know, for qualifications. We will give you that opportunity as long as you prove yourself. We will give you that. We will pay for your ACCA or your CMO, whatever that is. So it's trying to influence directors, your chief execs, to start to think differently, because what we're doing at the moment, we're not getting them in, and we're struggling. So we need to start thinking differently.
And Anna, you're absolutely right. And a lot of, especially with some finance, well, any type of qualification, CIMA, HR qualifications, a lot of those can be funded with your levy pots. And at the minute, a lot of people are probably wasting their levy pots. It's also worth bearing in mind that, especially for some of the smaller organisations, if your levy pots aren't huge, there is a levy transfer system that you can apply, and there's so much money wasted. Particularly if you're in the West Midlands, and even if you're not, you know, if you want some more information on it, just get in touch. I can talk you through the levy transfer scheme. It can be really complex. Until you've looked at it for 5 minutes, and then you go, oh, hang on, this is actually really easy. So it's just navigating it and finding a person at your local authority or for the West Mids, it's the West Mids combined, that will help you navigate that, to be honest. So there's a lot of funding available to be able to promise upskilling to new staff, which might be able to draw them from one sector to another and get the talent that you need.
And then
Thank
Anna, I
you.
guess for you as well, that's also then, you know, being able to take that into the local schools, the work experience, and tell them about those careers, and it will fund your qualifications.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's the other side of things, and certainly something I hadn't realised when I was, till I kind of obviously got a bit older. When you're in education, you don't realise the cost of future education. You know how much a degree is, that's fine. But if you're choosing not to do a degree, you don't really think about how you're going to get other qualifications. And I've got a very good friend of mine who's done his CIMA, done his other finance qualifications. I won't pretend to know them. But I was working with him through, I lived with him through lockdown when he was doing his CIMA, and he was delighted because people could just leave me alone. So he had the time to do it. But it's exactly that. Like, it wasn't until I was speaking to him and realised that his employer was part funding it, like just how expensive these things are. And I think presenting that as a package to young people is absolutely huge. Sally, I'm going to bring you in a moment. I just had another message there from Helen Airdrie, who said that, whose first name I now know, so thank you for dropping that through, Helen. Anyone would like to find out about becoming an enterprise advisor, linking with schools and doing it to make contact, she's on the Worcestershire team. That can direct you to your local team located elsewhere. So that's hairdrie@worcestershire.gov.uk. Maria said, as Matt just mentioned, she does a Housing Week podcast. Second season is now live. I am a guest. Thank you. I guess a week today on Anchor, Spotify, and Apple. So looking forward to that one. Again, we talk a lot about how we're going to engage people who aren't engaged with housing into careers. And Lottie says that sounds incredible, Anna. A great opportunity to increase diversity as well. And I think that's the other side. We are getting, and people have a number of different views on it, and I'm not professing to comment one way or another on that. But I think the next workforce coming through are going to be more diverse than we've ever known, from so many different, and I'm going to come to Jess on that in a moment because you're working so heavily with schools, from so many different ways that people identify and ways that people feel, etc. And our policies and our procedures need to make sure that for a sector which supports people who do come from so many backgrounds, our internal policies as housing providers follow that too. Sani, I'm going to bring you in, and then Jess, I'm going to come to you on that because I think it's a really interesting point. Sani.
Oh, Sani, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Sani.
Oh,
I recognise this. I recognise this a lot. It's like looking in a mirror. This is.
Touch wood, we haven't had mute yet, but we are. I'm going to come back to Sani in a moment. Jess, let me just jump onto you while Sani's sorting himself out there.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, just to echo on the different things that you've talked about, I actually host different careers and head teacher advisors conferences, and I think it would be great. We do something very similar, and we have had some physical ones where all the careers advisors actually come in and learn about new courses, but also trends and different things that are available. So we could definitely do something with all the careers advisors from the West Midlands schools. I mean, we cover the Black Country, Birmingham, Solihull, and further afield. I'd be happy to do something.
You've also got networks with other providers and other colleges and things like that. Like, you'll know who your people are in other arenas.
Yeah, of course.
I guess from that diversity piece that you're seeing working with schools at the moment, are you finding more challenges there? How are people, I guess the young people coming through now, how active are they at looking at that diversity policy or that engagement policy from your perspective?
It is, it's huge, isn't it? It's very important that we're doing it in the right ways and that we're working with employers that are addressing that in the right way as well. So it's all about building partnerships and engaging with people who we feel are working in the correct way. So again, housing associations are key. We do things differently through our recruitment, making sure we're encompassing everyone. We want to follow through, with organisations that do that, and it's important to that we're working with people who have the same ethos and
what I suppose what Jess is not saying outright is actually turning away from people who aren't working the right way, and that's why we're really keen to develop relationships with social housing sector in particular, because rightly or wrongly, as a sector, I think you're quite progressive in terms of the comparison with other sectors, and yet you know, I think everybody should be looking around and thinking, are we where we want to be? Probably not. I don't think there's any sector in the country that is, but I think we should be looking to those sectors that are trying to become more diverse and going, great, let's put our eggs in their basket. You know, we don't want to be getting involved in sectors that don't care and who aren't interested in doing that. So that's why we're so keen to build these relationships.
Well,
we want to give our
100%.
students as much choice in the ones that we think are valuing that. Yeah,
of everything that we do, our students are 100% at the core of every part of our activity. Being encompassing and having a holistic viewpoint and way we engage is definitely what at Sandwell and the Sandwell wider group want to achieve.
And I think it spurns better success rates as well. You know, a student is much more likely to stay if they feel like the values that they've been imbibed at college and at school are being taken forward with their employer. You know, it's a real shock to the system, I think, when you first go into work, if you think, oh God, this is like all I've been taught is to say please and thank you and be nice to people, and now I'm what the hell is this? You know,
I think as well from the outside, you know, housing is incredibly humble in the way that it works. You know, you've mentioned progressive there. I know that actually most people who work for a housing provider go, no, we're not. We're still trying to catch up because sometimes
keep you way ahead of
because the technology is behind, or because they're not as diverse as they want to be, or whatever else it'll be. And there's a lot of self reflection, a lot of time in housing that isn't always the most positive. And people go, oh, we need to do more because there is pressure from regulators and other things along those lines. But I think, and a couple of people have mentioned in the chat there. So Sam Shaw, Samantha Shaw, I think if we understand how to engage with young people, then we begin to engage them in the sector. And Lottie's mentioned that the workforce needs to reflect their customer base.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
That is the key thing, and almost where one of the reasons this conversation started, and Michael's agreed, and Arthur's there backed it up, that housing pays well, you get good benefits, you really get career options, and you get to make a difference in people's lives. I think more and more people are focused on that job satisfaction and the outcomes. And the difficulty with housing sometimes is that there aren't enough. There's a lot of people who champion housing within the sector, trying to put your head above the parapet outside of it and talking to more, you know, really going, by the way, housing is brilliant. It is difficult to do that. And I think that's a lot of time because of the humbleness of people in the sector, but also because of the way that it's regulated. Actually, people think they're not doing enough and that they're not as diverse as they need to be. And there's a lot of the doubts that come in. Sammy, you've been patient. I'm hoping we can hear you now. So I'm hoping to bring you in.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
We can. Thank you.
Fantastic. It's a lot of great points has been made already, and did I say, you know, I just wanted to add a little bit more as to how we can also create that more diversity within the housing sector, and also you know, influence the youngsters out there to say, look, this is a great opportunities and great career to come into it. And I was actually thinking to myself, going back to Mary's point about being an ambassador of some sort within the housing sector, I was thinking to myself, I need to be some sort of an associate, either with the colleges or schools and all of those things, in order to showcase what the opportunities are within housing sector. And especially from somebody who's from an ethnic minority background, I know that housing is not very diverse, especially in Wales. I know in some parts of England, it is very diverse. But when I look at my career over 10 years in housing, I haven't seen many diversity within the sector. So I'm always putting myself as if at the forefront to try and push that awareness to the community and the wider community and the youngsters in general. And yesterday I was actually in one of my places where I volunteer in Tiger Bay boxing in Pewtown. I was speaking to some of the youngsters there. One was 18 years old. He was in college studying IT, going into his second year. The other one was studying accounting and finance in his third year. And I said, actually, both of you, you're in a great age. You're already in college. You're doing this, you're doing that. What are you doing during the summer holidays? They both laughed. I said, okay, you know, I understand that you're going to have a lot of time now. And yeah, precisely, right? And I always tend to use my own experience and my own story to try and influence and to try and get that message out to them. And And I said, look, 6 weeks of doing nothing, this is the time for you now to take a step towards actually building a career. And I said, you're in your third year going into your accounting and finance. I work for Housing Association. When you have this 6 weeks work, when you have nothing to do, write to local housing associations, local housing providers, ask them for work experience, go and test it out, test the field. You got 6 weeks of doing nothing. What's the game? If a job comes up as a finance assistant, you're third year into your finance and accounting qualification, you can get a job as a finance assistant, and as a matter of fact, they'll pay for the rest of your qualification until you get your ACCA accreditation. So it's a great opportunity. And they looked at me in awe, like, how have I not met this guy before? And I said, look, you've done 2-3 years already. That's great. You've got experience of the academic side of this, but now you need to start putting it into practice. And you start earning with it as well. And I started giving them all this comparison. And the 18-year-old studying IT, I said, you could become an IT assistant, and you can start applying for jobs now, because the accounting student, he said, oh, I'm doing an interview for EE Stores. And I said, why did you apply for EE Stores when you could have applied for this and applied for that and work towards your career?
Again, I think that comes down to brand and knowing who they are. And I know Sarah and I spoke about this before, is that when you speak to the young people that obviously you engage with most, the brands that they go for, they go like what you said. Go on, tell the story about it. You asked like who they wanted to work for, and it was those who sponsored the football stadium or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, and people who come in all the time. So we did a casual survey, and the employers that came up again and again, West Brom, because the football team and the foundation do a lot of work with us, HSBC because they've been in a lot, Direct Line because they're in a lot. They're just brands that they know. It's got nothing to do with the quality of the job. It's really just about brand awareness when you get to that stage. And Sani, you're absolutely right that even if they'd got 2 weeks of that 6 weeks work experience, Matt and I both know, as we've done recruitment in the past, that would be the difference. Too often when I was recruiting for the NHS, must have NHS experience. I placed a guy who'd had a 2-week work placement on the back of him having a 2-week work placement. Did he know the NHS? No, God, of course he didn't. He'd worked in an accounts payable team for 2 weeks. What advantage did he have over other candidates? Barely anything, but it was enough to tip it over the edge. And he got the job. So yeah, it makes a huge amount of difference. And I think that's based on them meeting you and you giving them a push. And a lot of young people aren't getting that push, and that's sort of our job, to be honest. That's for me and Jess to look internally and say, not all kids are going to have the background or parents that are going to push them to do that. In fact, most won't. Samwell and Cadbury College are both in lower socioeconomic areas. A lot of those kids come from backgrounds where they may be in families that have never worked. And so this is such unfamiliar territory that we need to go out and say, you are safe in those places. Here are some places that we would like you to come and meet and work with and start familiarising yourself with. So it's not always HSBC and Sports Direct or the JD Sports, the brands that they know that they want to go and see. I just want to touch on something briefly, Matt. I'll come back to you in a second if you don't mind. But one of the things that sort of came to me while we were talking is that housing apprenticeship. I think it has a natural place in public services for us. And our public services team are crying out for a new apprenticeship at the moment. And I think it makes sense to brand it as such. Give people another option within public services that isn't the police, because that's the main core of public services for us is the police force. But actually, public service is something wider. Obviously, with all of the chat around defunding the police and pushing that funding into areas that are probably better placed to deal with those social issues, why not say, as part of our public services provision, is a housing apprenticeship? That kind of makes a lot of sense. And I think we should start talking about that branding. Who mentioned it earlier? Lucy was talking about job titles. I think this is an extension of that, actually, Lucy. Where does it fit within the curriculum? Where does it fit within a sector? Let's talk about it as fitting in public services.
I think so. That's a fantastic point, and it brings us on to some of the people here joining our employer boards, people who are actually shaping our curriculum. So 100%. Experts in your industry coming along and it might be public services. Some of the roles might stretch over to health and social care.
And of
It
course
might
the
be in
trades.
business, you know, because it's so diverse. Just as well, talking about the equality and diversity within Samwell College, I was looking, I was thinking, I couldn't remember the number, but within our college, there's actually over 90 languages spoken. I had a quick look on our website, that's what I was doing quickly, and I wanted to say, but that's how diverse we are, that's one of our strengths. So if we could help with work placements, which we are looking for, and we've got a diverse community of students who are looking to go to roles which are, you know, looking to develop people.
Yeah, and our students and learners that reflect your customer base a lot of the time.
This is going to be something I mentioned a couple of times, actually. You'd said there that, you know, you talk about people who, families that have never worked, those kind of things. There's a strong chance they live in social housing, so they'll know about the sector. Jess there has talked about the diversity in language. I think everyone here will have at some point had customers whose English isn't first language, tenants whose English isn't first language, and you're crying out for housing officers,
it's true of a lot of our students, to be honest,
who can engage with that person with their first language. I'm just going to go through the chat. I know a few people have to leave because of other meetings, but Lozzie's mentioned there the satisfaction of knowing they're helping improve others' lives is the biggest attraction, and I think this is bringing it into that public sector would be brilliant, Sarah.
Yeah,
Jordan,
and just to touch very briefly there, Matt, because you mentioned about that being the main draw there, Lozzie. I think that would be very, very powerful for this generation of young people who have taken a step back and have looked at society and gone, like, you know, I don't want any part of that. You know, this generation are incredibly engaged with social responsibility. It's our job to show them how they can use their career to go. Help. Yeah. Sorry, Matt.
And who's going to back their side? No, don't be at all. Yeah. Jordan, thank you for jumping in and on the chat today. Agree with some earlier points. They started as an apprentice in housing and have stayed in the sector for over 10 years. They believe it's more towards a lack of knowledge and education of what housing actually is. And I couldn't agree with more than this. I'll read the rest of your comment before I comment myself, but he works over in Merseyside, and a lot of my customers, my family and friends don't seem to be aware of what social housing is and still refer to it as council housing. And that 100%, if I tell anybody...
Matt's family are exactly the same.
I joined District 4 as a backing, you know, as guys to back me on the HR and the finance side. And they said, so what's social housing? And these are guys who own multiple businesses. I'm going, how do we not know what this is as a sector? But again, I couldn't agree with you more there in terms of the lack of knowledge of what housing actually is. I was speaking to a domestic violence refuge recently, their chief exec, and talking about social housing. And they said, well, what do you class as social housing? I was like, well, I incorporate yourselves within that. It's housing that supports people who most in need in whatever vice that comes through. And they said, oh, so what it used to be called council housing, it used to be called this, that, and the other. Said it is. It's just the term at the moment. And I agree with you, there needs to be work on that branding. Louise, great to have you with us from Connexus, discussing being more flexible in year one, so they capture and engage with those young people coming from our supported schemes, foyers and care leavers, which is amazing here because there is a huge cohort of people to look for. Helen Harding, I haven't got their surname on here, so I'm looking on, I can't find Helen. Oh, Helen's had to go. That's what she was saying. That's why I can't find her in the chat. And Lucy's also had to, as has Michael and Arthur. Absolutely fine. Sally, can I get more info on the enterprise work? Marie has passed an email address and I will circulate that. But Anna, I'm going to bring you in because I imagine there's a lot of points there that really resonate, because I know obviously you look at things from a HR side.
Yeah, so it's just a quick one. Also, what I have found attending a lot of career fairs in schools, some of the comments that I get for students, and it's quite sad actually that it's happening in schools, they feel that a lot of the teachers or the principals or just the schools really only focus on students that want to go to university, and it fits students that want to go apprentices. And I'm not going to say which school, but I know there was one head of, and he said, well, for the students that don't do that well, they, you know, you can come in and talk about your apprenticeships. And I was like, what? Sorry, I don't get that. That's, you know, and I think some of them also feel that, oh my God, I'm doing an apprenticeship, I'm not that great, and I'll do that. And I think that knocks their confidence already from even from just 100%. Day one. And yeah, it was just to say that. And what else can we do? Because I'll be honest, my children are they're only 8, but actually they're doing very well. I would actually be in a recruitment and talent, I'd rather have them doing an apprenticeship because they'll learn everything. Because the life skills, the way they communicate, they talk, and everything. They'll learn that sooner, for me, than doing a degree, and someone who has done that degree. But that's my opinion, you know.
I think it's about
I'm still
offering some
mid-30s paying
independent
off my
advice.
degree. Sorry,
Yeah.
Sarah, I was saying, yeah, Anna, I agree with you. I'm mid-30s still paying off my degree, and my degree is in history and education. Now, it got me a bit of a platform, and I've made some amazing friends through it, but I agree.
Yeah, it was the best 3 years that I've ever spent socially. It gave me absolutely bugger all in the way of career backing. But no, I mean, I agree, Anna, and I think it's about offering independent careers advice. As a college, we're marketed on or targeted on that. Sorry, so it's actually really important for us to be giving that independent careers advice. Jess and I are part of a skills division, so the majority of what that skills division is more vocational. Jess is spanning between vocational and 16 to 19, so she has a really tough job. And we get a lot of students coming in saying, you know, I don't know whether to come to university or do this. And I always say it was the best 3 years of my life. I haven't used my degree, but that is up to you. You know, if you want to do that, great. As degrees get more and more expensive, the kids now come back 12% on a student loan. It's insane.
Yes.
I can't in any good conscience say to someone, absolutely do a degree. I would say, look around. But
you can
I
look
think
at the
it's the job of
apprenticeship route for a degree.
Yeah.
Re-apprentice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
But
just
look
wanted
at-
to add just one
an
thing.
apprenticeship for it.
Talking about schools and the whole dumbing down of apprenticeships and how it used to be. Things are changing. Apprenticeships,
They are, yeah.
the Institute of Apprenticeships has been a big shift. The way the apprenticeships changed with the levy and the more influence that employers have had. So times are changing, things are improving. And schools have always been the same in terms of, especially those with sixth forms, they want to encourage their students to stay on. So looking at, you know, vocational colleges or looking at apprenticeship routes, it's been really, really hard to build relationships and to get into those schools. But there is a clause, the Baker clause, and there's also Gatsby benchmarks to do with careers. Schools have to let other providers in and to give different advice regarding career options. So they can't,
isn't it?
yeah, they can't do that anymore.
I agree with you, Jess. I think they like social housing. There's still a stigma with apprentices because of the parents.
Yeah.
Because of, you know, people of my generation, back when you did an apprentice, you only did an apprentice if you weren't going to uni. It was almost and it's that's got to change. I'm aware I've only got a couple of minutes, so I'm going to bring in Claire and then Linda. So Claire.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I've been reminded really that I didn't want to go to university when I was 18. I did my A-levels. I didn't want to go to university. And actually in hindsight, I'm quite glad I didn't, because I haven't got student debt. I have got a degree, which I studied for via my housing association, my employer.
Salt in the wounds here from Claire.
Sorry, it was fully, I'm sorry to do that.
I'm looking at my pay
funded.
slip later, I'll tell you what.
It was fully funded, and I basically got the same level of qualification without any of the debt.
Amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely amazing. If that isn't the selling point, then what is? Linda, let me bring you in.
Can I just build on what Claire's just said? Not only did she get the qualification, she had the work experience she could put into practice all of her learning, and you knew then that you were getting a person that could actually academically learn it and actually put it into practice.
Yeah,
and that's the benefit
preaching to
of
the
the
choir there though.
apprenticeships.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, I think it's worth highlighting, isn't it?
And the way that we get
Absolutely,
engaged with young people is to bring young people with us when we go to careers events, so that they can explain their story, explain why they went down this route, and explain how they've succeeded.
And we couldn't agree more there. And I know actually on that, and I will just mention, just as we're wrapping up, we've got a careers fair at Sandwell College tomorrow.
Yeah.
A number of local housing providers are coming along to it. And we have encouraged exactly what you said there, Linda, which was to bring along your younger members of staff as well. You know, young people don't need to be seeing people even my age. You know, it's not about that. They want to be seeing those young 20, 23, 24, 25-year-olds who are already succeeding, who are doing really well, who've already got more money coming in and going, right, how do I get that?
But I also think it's worth having the grassroots successes. You know, Arthur's disappeared now, and I'm sure this is echoed across many of your stories, but I know that Arthur, having started in customer service and now at director level, is exactly the kind of person I want to say, look, you can do that. Like, there is absolutely no difference between what he's done and what you can do. Like, that's exactly it. And I think part of making the industry a bit sexier is, you know, it's having people rocking up in a Merc, you know, and going, I work in social housing, yeah, and what, you know, but that's the kind of thing that plays, even as daft and as basic as it sounds, those stories resonate with people. You know, I'm off to,
especially young people who are constantly in competition.
I'm off to
and
Vegas
trying
for 2 weeks.
The young
Where do you work?
person
I'm working
sharing
social
their own
housing.
story is
100%.
paramount. Yeah, you got to have ambassadors for each area, really.
It's influential when I turn up on my ZX6R Ninja. Turn up on my motorbike, and everybody's looking at me like, "Oh, what does this guy do?" And
Sammy, if you fancy a trip to the West Mids, you pop into West Brom, all right, mate? Yeah,
I'll get your lunch, mate.
Come and cruise outside our college, please, mate.
I mean, to be honest, if there is the opportunity there to showcase what we can do as a sector,
100%.
and to influence the next generation, that is an absolute passion of mine. So yeah, definitely, it's something that I would do.
I think we're going to lose quite a few people now as everybody has to dive into their next meeting. But Matt, what I think it's worth doing, and I'm sure you're going to anyway, is everybody that's happy to communicate. Matt will share around an email of anyone who wants to carry on. Jess and I are available for conversations. If you fall in our geographical remit, great. If you don't, we're more than happy to answer questions. With apprenticeships, we deliver nationally anyway. So I definitely...
if anyone's on the LinkedIn Social Housing Roundtable group, I'll put the recording on there. And again, I'll circulate people's details as they're happy to do so. I just want to thank everyone for coming today, because this was a really important
thank you so much, everyone.
We've done this on short notice. Big thank you to Sarah and Jess for coming today and sharing their stories and their knowledge, and highlighting some of the other issues that I think is very easy when you work in housing to go, right, this is the problem, and actually to know it from the young person's perspective as well. How do we find that blend? So
I think we've had a really nice first conversation, haven't we, Matt? And it might be nice to arrange something in a month or two that goes on to, okay, well, what are the practical steps that we can take? Because you've had such a good exploratory meeting. Maybe to try and get everybody back in to talk about what are the next steps, and Jess and I will pull something together beforehand that actually goes through what are the actual things that you can do to be involved.
Well, Helen's mentioned there that in Worcestershire they're still looking for contributors, so I'll definitely
maybe we can combine that with the housing conference, Matt. That's something.
100%, 100%. Thank you, absolutely, everybody. Cheers for coming today.
Can I just say, whilst we can't join you tomorrow at your careers event, that doesn't worry me specifically, because I know that if you've got other housing providers there, they are doing the work. And once you get somebody to say, we've done it several times, especially down in the Worcestershire area. I've had one table, Wyre Forest Community Housing Trust, Sanctuary Housing, and I've had an apprentice somebody come to me and say they're interested. And I say, I haven't got anything. Go and talk to Michelle over at Sanctuary. She's bound to have something. And we will populate, cross-fertilise, whatever you want to call it.
And that's the beauty of the sector,
Absolutely.
Because I completely agree with you.
People into the sector. And
this is very much the first step for us.
Tomorrow, you will have other people there that will be championing housing.
100%, yeah. Really, it's been genuinely really nice speaking to everybody, and thank you for everybody who's contributed, even on the chat as well. Thanks so much, Matt, for hosting. This has been brilliant.
That's right. Thank you, Sarah. Jess, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. It was lovely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.